I'm Jennifer. Sitting here in my grandmother's old chair, surrounded by the evidence that has upended my world, I can't help but reflect on how everything led to this moment. The digital clock on the desk reads 2:55 a.m., and I'm about to unleash a storm that will change everything. It all started with my grandmother's passing. I remember leaving the cemetery, the rain tapping on the windshield like insistent fingers, as if trying to tell me something. I made my way to the lawyer's office, a place filled with the smell of old leather and long-kept secrets. I was wearing the black dress I'd worn to my grandmother, Amelia's, funeral. The cuffs were still damp, and a loose thread at the elbow kept distracting me, like a nagging thought. When I entered the office, the receptionist was speaking softly into the phone, then carefully placed the pen back into the brass holder with a precision that suggested she hated surprises. I took a deep breath and told myself I could get through this. A few minutes later, my sister, Isabella, arrived 20 minutes late. She glided into the room as if she owned the world. Her white blazer glowed softly in the lamplight. She didn't even glance at me. Instead, she was busy swiping on her phone. "Traffic," she said, with a fake smile. The lawyer, Mr. Thompson, opened a thick folder. "Your grandmother, Amelia Thompson, was very clear about her final wishes," he said. "Isabella, as the elder granddaughter, you inherit the fully furnished 3-bedroom apartment on Park Avenue, along with her jewelry and the balance of her savings, approximately $350,000. I felt a pang in my stomach as I thought about the memories associated with that place. It was where I learned so many things from Amelia. But Isabella just leaned back, looking satisfied, as if she'd expected it all along. "Jennifer," Mr. Thompson continued, "you inherit the family property in Cedarwood Village, the house and the surrounding 2 acres, along with all its contents." Isabella let out a small, mocking laugh. "The old ruin in the middle of nowhere. How generous." Grandma always had a sense of humor. I felt the heat rise in my neck. I'd only been to that house once, when I was 14, and it had seemed like a forgotten place even then. Then, Mr. Thompson slid a sealed envelope across the desk to me. It was sealed with red wax stamped with a rose and was to be opened only upon my first entry to the Cedarwood property. Isabella stood up, smoothing her non-existent wrinkles. "I have a meeting. If you need a demolition crew, I know people," she said, blowing me a perfumed air kiss before leaving. I stared at the envelope, which seemed to hold both nothing and everything at the same time. Mr. Thompson said gently, "What seems less valuable at first might have a different kind of worth." Those words followed me home like a persistent shadow. When I got home, my husband, Daniel, was in the bedroom packing. He was being very methodical, folding his clothes with precision. I asked, "Going somewhere?" He didn't look up. I knew that look on his face. It was the look he had when he was about to have a difficult conversation. "We need to talk," he said. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed we'd bought after a long day of mattress testing and arguing about firmness. He told me that our marriage wasn't working. I was shocked. I asked him how, and he said it was about direction, ambition, and the future. He said Isabella had offered him a senior partnership, and it was everything he'd been working for. I was devastated. I looked at myself in the closet mirror. My hair was damp and scraped into a messy bun, and my black dress was wrinkled. I'd been feeling so tired lately, ever since my hours at the local bookstore were cut. Daniel said that Isabella saw the part of him that wanted to build an empire, while I only saw the part that liked Sunday pancakes and Netflix. He said that Isabella was picking him up in 20 minutes. I repeated the words, "Isabella's picking you up," each word like a bitter pill. He said it was just business, but we both knew it was a lie. After he left, I was left alone in the apartment. It felt so empty, like a shell of what it used to be. I gathered the papers from Mr. Thompson's office, the deed, and the sealed envelope, and laid them on the table. I traced the seal on the envelope with my thumb. Amelia had always been a no-nonsense woman. If she left me that house, it was for a reason. I decided to make a fresh start. I washed my face, changed into jeans, and tied my hair back. I called the bookstore to give notice. Then I started researching practical things like satellite internet providers near Cedarwood Village, gas stations, and the nearest hardware store. I packed a bag with work gloves, a flashlight, bottled water, and contractor bags. The next morning, I drove away from the city in an old truck I'd bought from a retired mechanic. As I left, the city lights faded behind me, and the world around me grew quieter. The GPS stopped working 10 miles out from Cedarwood. I pulled out the hand-drawn map Mr. Thompson had given me. When I finally reached Cedarwood Village, it was a desolate place. There were a few boarded-up buildings, and a stray dog wandered across the road, looking at me with weary eyes. 2 miles later, I saw the house. It was in a sorry state, with a sagging roof, missing shingles, and broken windows. I stepped out of the truck and walked up to the door. The key Mr. Thompson gave me was old-fashioned and heavy. When I turned it, the door creaked open, and instead of the expected smell of rot, there was a faint scent of lavender. Inside, the living room was filled with sheets covering the furniture. I found a switch, and to my surprise, a light bulb flickered on. I walked further in and pulled the sheet off a chair. It was a beautiful burgundy velvet chair, a sign that this place was not as abandoned as it seemed. On the wall above the fireplace hung a portrait of a woman who looked just like me. Her eyes seemed to pierce through me, as if she knew my every thought. I remembered the envelope in my pocket and pulled it out. I broke the seal and started to read. Dearest Jennifer, if you are reading this, Isabella has taken what she wanted, and you are left with what she didn't. This house is not a ruin, it's a sanctuary. There's a door in the basement behind the wine rack, where your true inheritance begins. I was filled with a sense of purpose. I made my way to the basement. It was cold and dark, but there was electricity. I found the wine rack and, after some searching, discovered a hidden hinge. I twisted a bottle, and the rack swung open, revealing a hidden room. Inside the room, there was a desk filled with files. The top folder was labeled Isabella. I opened it and was shocked by what I found. There were photographs of Isabella in hotel lobbies with men in suits, receipts, phone records, and bank statements linked to shell companies. There was also a timeline that showed she had been cultivating Daniel for 2 years. I realized that Isabella had planned everything. She had stolen my husband and tried to take everything from me. But Amelia had been watching. She had been collecting evidence all these years, building a network of journalists, federal agents, and prosecutors. I knew what I had to do. I spent days planning. I bought a digital recorder and met Daniel at a coffee shop. I asked him what had changed, and he told me that Isabella saw his potential. I recorded his words, knowing they would be crucial. Then I called Isabella and told her about the hidden investments tied to the house. She was immediately interested. We agreed to meet for lunch. At the lunch, I showed her some carefully selected documents and told her there was at least $2 million, maybe more. She greedily agreed to a 50-50 split. Back at the house, I assembled all the evidence, Amelia's files, Daniel's recorded confession, and Isabella's acceptance of the bait. I added my recordings and scanned documents to the pre-written emails. Now, sitting here at 2:55 a.m., I'm about to click send all. I look at the portrait of Amelia on the wall. This is for both of us, I whisper. At exactly 3 a.m., I click the button. The next few days were a whirlwind. Reporters started calling, and investigations began. Isabella's empire started to crumble. She called me, her voice full of anger and desperation. She said I'd destroyed our family, but I knew she had destroyed it long ago. Months passed, and Isabella was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy. Daniel's career was in ruins, and he moved out of state. I transformed the house. I repaired the roof, painted the walls, and cleared the garden. The basement office became my headquarters. I used Amelia's files to help others who had been wronged. 6 months after the verdict, I received a letter from Isabella, full of apologies. I read it 3 times and then put it in a folder labeled Closed Cases. One evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the fireplace. I looked at the portrait of Amelia and finally understood her expression. She was satisfied. She had planted the seeds of resilience in me, and they had bloomed. The house, once a ruin, was now my sanctuary, and I was no longer a victim. I was an investigator, ready to fight for justice.